All right, next up we've got Carldrifter. Hey, Carl.
Hello, everybody.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Yeah, my name is Carldrifter, based in China, and I mainly focus on simulation, procedural modeling, and shading in Houdini. And I have some experience in field motion design and all kind of different industries. And also, I'm a blogger. So I have 20,000 followers in China, and I want to promote Houdini techniques to China. Yeah.
Right on. So what are you going to be talking about today?
Well, when I joined this Mardini challenge, I reflect a lot about my experience in Houdini. Now I want to share my experience, including my learning methods about Houdini. So I want to share with everybody.
Excellent. Well, let's get started.
Yeah, cool. Let's go.
Mardini challenge is one of my extraordinary journeys, and I regard it as a challenge that every Houdini artist needs to participate in once in a lifetime. During this month, I kept breaking my own limits and pushed myself further and further. Luckily, I was satisfied with the result not only because I won the overall best collection, but also because I make a breakthrough of myself. During this challenge, I reflected a lot from my Houdini experience, and there are so many things I want to share with you, but I asked myself, what is the most valuable and urgent topic? So here comes my philosophy of Houdini, the core and the critical concepts I summarized for my 4 years Houdini journey. Please allow me to introduce my very ancient Chinese philosophy, Taoism. One of the most popular saying like this: Tao produce one, one produce two, two produce three, then vary and are born the universe of all things. So here is what I understand. Taoism is the philosophy that emphasizes the essence and natural. Anything complicated comes from simplicity, so don't get lost by the complex appearance. Anything complex is made of simplicity, so try to divide it and master it one by one. Combination with this idea, I make a series of Houdini tutorials named The Taoism of Houdini. By now, it includes 7 volumes and more than 1,000 videos covering shop, warp, wax, shading, and rendering. I already spent 2 years on diving deep on each single node and parameter to reveal the essence, but on the whole, I try my best to make a connection of each piece of knowledge systematically. I know this is an impossible mission, but I just keep doing it as long as I can. The ideas I share today are mostly comes from this series of tutorials. I need to make a claim that everything I said here is my own opinion and my own understanding of Houdini, which does not represent side effects. There are some imprecise expressions because I need to simplify and use human language to translate some terminology. Again, these are all about making complexity simple and focus on the essence. First of all, I want to share my mindset towards Houdini. Here is a very famous learning curve of popular 3D software from the internet. We can see that Houdini learning curve is quite different from others. I believe many beginners felt scary when they tried to use Houdini for the first time. However, let's focus on the essence that Houdini is just a tool, like a pencil or a pen, which is designed to help people solve certain problems. You are not supposed to feel scary of a tool, right? Let's go back to this image. Some people feel discouraged because they only see parts of the truth. Actually, there are 3 points, but most people only see the deep learning curve from point A to point B. However, if you can reach point B, then nothing will ever stop you. It's only a matter of time to be a master, like point C. I regard point B as the breaking point, and some people just gave up before they can reach point B. In today's topic, I want to share my experience about how I make it to the point B. Thanks to SciFS and thousands of Houdini artists who are willing to share their knowledge and experience on the internet, we could find all kinds of tutorials, forums, activities, documents, and answers to almost any problems. It is and it will be much easier than I learned Houdini 4 years ago. However, Every coin has two sides. A lot of beginners just submerged in countless tutorials and don't know where to start. Some even feel impetuous and anxious. Again, I would like to say just focus on the essence, and you will see most of the tutorials are just similar. Last but not least, do I need to have certain prerequisites before I learn Houdini like programming, physics, maths, and English? If you have this prerequisite, you are much easier to learn Houdini. But if you haven't, just change your mindset that why don't you just take advantage of Houdini to master all of that instead? I was a student of liberal arts from China, so programming, physics, and maths were not my friend before, and English is not my native language. However, I have never found them so interesting since I used Houdini. Matrix, fluid mechanics, Newton's law, algorithm encoding. I can simply visualize and put them into use in Houdini. I use Houdini to discover a new world, and using Houdini made myself more powerful. In fact, I plan to encourage my children to use Houdini to help with their primary school studies, which is more interesting and easier than just reading a book. Here, I would like to share my main 4 methods to learn Houdini from simple to advanced. 1. Daily exercise. The easiest way is to follow some tutorials and do it by yourself. I know this sounds normal and simple, but I need to point out some key points. First, make it fast, but persistent. From my own experience, I spent 1 to 2 hours each day and insisted on it for more than 1 year. No matter how simple the tutorial seems to be, you need to do it in person, because some technique you thought you understood, but in fact you did not. Please make sure that you are actually learning instead of just watching a tutorial. Second, in each daily exercise, just focus on 1 or 2 points or technique. For example, how to use a rank to control an attribute, or what is the essence and function of a normal. Here, I mean you should try your best to make clear of each piece of knowledge instead of just copying or memorizing, which is much harder than you thought. Therefore, I would like to choose the specific tutorials normally less than 1 hour. When I need to figure out what normal actually is, I would watch all kinds of tutorials related to normal, including normal in other 3D software and in computer graphics. Last, you don't need to make a masterpiece for daily exercises, because what your goal is to learn this Houdini tool. There is no need for you to make a whole world, from modeling to rendering. Remember, make clear of a point at a time and go on and on. Second, learning by teaching. The best way to test your learning result is to teach others. When I make a video tutorial, I force myself to make clear of each piece of knowledge and then use my own understanding to teach others. I cannot muddle along when facing something I don't know, so I have to spend a lot of time to understand it first. Sometimes it is tough and time-consuming, but it worth. Also, you can receive some response and questions from students, which are inspiring to you in return. I believe many teachers would have the same feelings with me. I encourage you to share what you learn and your skill, no matter in free or commercial way, which all make contributions to Houdini community. Third, node by node, parameter by parameter. This is what I am doing in Taoism of Houdini, which is the most time-consuming way to learn Houdini. But this is the very solid way. I don't think it's suitable for everyone, and there is no need for you to truly understand each parameter on each node, because some functions are designed for a very rare situation. However, as a teacher or a crazy Houdini fan, I like to take this challenge and have a lot of fun when I discover a hidden function of a node. Also, this helps me accumulate multiple ways to solve one problem. The last one, thinking as Houdini developers do. This is the advanced way of learning in which you consider yourself as the developer of Houdini. If you need to design a function or a node to the user, How will you realize the function and define the parameter? How can you do to make it user-friendly as well as powerful enough to cover most situations? Like I said before, every coin has two sides, and you always need to balance and compromise. Some parameters seem useless at first, but when later in some specific situation, they are really powerful. Most Houdini nodes are compound, so you can dive in and see what's going on in it. The more I do this, the more I admire the genius of the HIVE developers. Gradually, I began to appreciate the beauty of the node design and the thinking model of the developer. Also, I am intrigued to learn the algorithm and programming behind the node, and find it so interesting. What's more, I am able to customize lots of nodes which meet my demand and fit to my habits. These are the 4 ways I use to learn Houdini, and hopefully this will give you some inspiration. The formula of Houdini, IPO, import, process, and output. It took me 2 years to figure out that Houdini is all that simple. In other words, it is all about data flow. In Houdini, you don't need to do it step by step, and you can change process anytime you want. No matter in modeling, rendering, or simulation, it is all about how data transfer and calculation. IPO formula is very simple, but important. Many beginners only focus on process and neglect input and output, so they keep making mistakes without knowing why. If you cannot offer the correct or necessary input data into Houdini, no matter how similar the data is, you won't get a right result. Once you understand this, you are truly learning Houdini. In Houdini, you may see these terminologies: data, attribute, variable, parameter. So what are the differences among them? In shop, we create attribute for geometry and bring attribute into DOP. So attribute becomes data. When we use VEX or Python, we treat it as variable, and we call it parameter on the nodes. They may have some small differences on the surface, but under the hood, they are the same thing. To Houdini or computer, they are just data. In Houdini, you can transfer among attribute, data, and variable, and normally you can use attribute or data to drive parameter in nodes. In Houdini 18.5, there is a new node, attribute from parameters. You can transfer parameters back to attribute and make all of them unified. So when I talk about attribute or data, I refer to the same thing. Now we can review the function of a node, adding data or changing data. There are 2 node network types, the single input and output, or the multiple inputs or multiple outputs. When we are in production, we just repeat this process again and again. And finally, we have a very complex network which seems scary to others. But under the hood, they are all about data flow. Data flow is the most important thing we should keep in mind, which is much important than what nodes you choose or what you see in a viewport. In a real project, we normally deal with hundreds of data, and they cannot be displayed in the viewport at the same time. Like the cache of pyro simulation, we often only display the density field and make temperature, phase, and velocity field invisible. And there are some data you cannot visualize directly, such as the quotidians and matrix. Sometimes we will be fooled by the viewport or the node network. Therefore, I think one of the most special user experience in Houdini is that you need to check the data or attribute frequently by middle mouse click on a node, or open the geometry spreadsheet panel to check the data value. Next, switch to Houdini for some simple demonstrations. Here we got a simple node chain with some popular nodes. I created a sphere node and set its primitive type to polygon, and then use transform node to move up 1 unit in y-axis. After that, I use a group node to make a point group of this sphere and name this group sphere. Using normal shot to calculate the point normal. reset position shop to add a red attribute, and color shop to add red color. Using assemble nodes to add a name attribute, an attribute node to create a full flow type attribute, and set the initial value to 1. Finally, I add a material shop and set the material path to /matte/principal shader. Altogether, we use 9 different nodes, and let's check what's happening under the hood. By opening the geometry spreadsheet panel, we can see that on point level, we have 5 attributes and 1 group. On primitive level, we have 2 attributes. Also, don't forget we actually create 42 points with point number attribute and connected orders so that we have 80 primitive or faces. We go back to the node chain and we can divide these 9 nodes into 2 types. The transform shop is for changing the position data, and the rest 8 nodes adding new data. Since we already know what's happening under the hood, I can use different ways to make the identical result. Here is another node chain with only 3 nodes, but the result is identical to the first node chain. The very first step is the same with a sphere creation and set its type to polygon, but after that, using a point wrangle shop to add or change point attributes, and a primitive wrangle shop to add primitive attributes. In the point wrangle, I add 1 unit to the P position and create a thing group and attribute one by one. In the primitive wrangle, I did the same thing. Obviously, the second chain node is much more concise and efficient. There are still many other ways to make the same result. Here I want to demonstrate that it doesn't matter what nodes or process you choose. What matters is the data flow under the hood. Let's switch to another example. We got a polygon sphere and add a normal shop to calculate the normal. When we enable the viewport visualization of normal, we can see that the normal is pointing outward as we predict. For some beginners, they just noted that if we want to add normal, we should use a normal shop. However, it is far from enough if you want to master Houdini. Here is a similar situation with sphere point cloud. You may think that by adding a normal shop, you can create a scene pointing out normal. But sadly, you fail this time. They are just 0 value. Now you feel panic and wonder if there is something wrong with Houdini. You are pretty sure you follow the right process and use exactly the same node and the same setting as the tutorial, but you cannot get the same result. The problem is that you did not fully understand the function behind the normal shop and what the normal really is. Let's go back to the input. Although the sphere and the sphere point cloud are similar as you thought, they actually have different data. For a normal shop, they need point connection order to calculate or initialize the normal data. But the sphere point could only offer the individual point position without any connection information. So you can get a normal attribute, but the initial values are all 0. How can I create a thin normal value? You need to go back to the essence of a normal, and it is just a normalized vector, which means that it only cares about the direction with length of 1 unit. Therefore, you have to understand the basic calculation of a vector and realize it in Houdini. Here is my solution, using a simple vec function to create a normal by myself. Using current point position such as the center of the sphere point cloud center, which is 0, 0, 0, and then normalize it. This is universal method than normal shop. You can use this method to create normal for a sphere or the circle too. Also, you can add some bias to the normal calculation. Now I leave a question for you that if the sphere point cloud center is not at the origin, can you create a same normal? The answer related to another topic, how to calculate the center of a geometry. Through this example, I want to show what I mean by making clear of each piece of knowledge instead of memorizing the node. We need to keep asking ourselves why or what happened indeed, no matter how simple it seems to be. This is my secret about how I make it to the breaking point. There are more examples about IPO formula in all parts of Houdini. Here is the modeling example. I use yellow rectangle to mark adding data nodes and Y rectangle to mark the changing data nodes. I created a sphere data and create UV attribute by UV project, changing the position data by transform shop and delete some point data by click shop. Use polyextrude shop to add some point data and create a group data for bevel shop. Subdivide shop to create more point data and normal shop to create normal data. UV transform shop change the UV data and material shop to add material path data. In simulation, it is the same thing. I bring data from shop and import them into DOP, and add port jack, collision and gravity data, and finally using the flip solver to calculate and changing the data like point position, velocity, etc. In rendering, you actually just assemble geometry, lights, camera, material, and render engine data into renderer and calculate the final image data. Here comes to the summary. In Houdini, we can import all kinds of data like geometry, image, audio, script, or create initial data such as point, sphere, or grid, and then adding data or changing data by nodes. Here you can use procedural or non-procedural ways. And finally, you output data, no matter geometry cache or render image. They are just data in different forms. There are multiple ways in Houdini to do the same thing. And the most important thing is what data the node creates, or how it changes the data indeed. Anything complicated is made of this simple IPO formula by repeating again, and again. Proceduralism. This is a very famous feature for Houdini, and for me it's really simple. Just finding the relationship. On the surface, it is about a relationship among nodes or relationships of parameters in one node. But under the hood, it's all about the relationship among data. Some relationships are simple and direct, but others may be very complicated. Again, all complex relationships come from simple relationship, right? Simulation. This is another most powerful part for Houdini, and I believe a lot of people are heading for this part. However, I don't recommend the beginners to learn dynamic for a starting point. Actually, I think shop is the core of Houdini, and we can learn any data in it. Simulation is just a dynamic version of shop. I was inspired by my dear professor Sunny Tech from Victoria University of Wellington. That simulation is all about data movement or visualization of velocity. I was fully shocked when I saw this conclusion for the first time, and again, this is all about reviewing the essence of simulation. What's next? There are more to share in the future, and you can see that these topics are not related to specific node, but they are very basic concepts you have to deal frequently with Houdini. Finally, thanks again for SideFS and everyone. Hope you all have a happy journey with Houdini.